The United States Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. took up oral arguments for a big Obamacare battle. In this instance, the Little Sisters of the Poor had their day in court where they and a number of other co-plaintiffs were addressing the issue of the contraception measure within Obamacare. Let's get to some of the details. Now, what's most interesting, and this is from the New York Daily News, they're saying the very existence of this case is a shame. And so the question is whether Obamacare tramples the conscience rights of the Little Sisters of the Poor and several other faith-based employers. Now, the regulations that Obama's health and insurance program require cost-free access to 20 pregnancy prevention measures, and they range from birth control pills to surgical sterilization, include morning after and week after medications. Now, because of this and the religious objection that many feel, they found it morally offensive to this enforced program falling upon these faith-based organizations and even employers, because essentially that's what many of them are. And the administration retreated into offering a so-called accommodation. Religious objectors need only a document to opt out, at which point the government will order their insurers both to provide the coverage and to notify beneficiaries that the employers had nothing to do with it. So basically, in the government's explanation, the simple act of filling out a mere piece of paper, a form, places the slightest possible burden on the free exercise of religion and exempts objectors from participating in conduct deemed sinful. Now, let's get to some of the discussion in the arguments, because you're going to find this very interesting. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, what I don't understand, Mr. Clement, is will any government law that someone claims burdens their practice ever be insubstantial? Because every believer that's ever come before us, including the people in the military, using the conscientious objector clause, are saying that my soul will be damned in some way. I'm not naysaying that this is a very substantial perceived personal burden by them, but if that's always going to be substantial, how will we ever have a government that functions? How will we ever have anything that the government can demand people to do in objecting? Now let's stop right there, because there's a slippery slope that Justice Sonia Sotomayor is going down. How will we ever have a government that functions? But the government clearly functions without overstepping boundaries, without infringing. Because if you look at this, the government is saying, if you don't do this, you will be fined, you will be penalized. And looking at Hobby Lobby, they were in fact penalized or have been penalized. And others are being penalized. If you look at this whole thing under the Obamacare, and this aspect of this contraceptive issue is a great aspect because it gets right into the real meat of the burden when it comes to dealing with Obamacare and the burden it places on businesses for a number of issues. And Justice Sonia Sotomayor is willing to go down into the specific and ask the question, how will we ever have a government that functions? Now, this gets into the very heart and issue of liberty itself. And I'll read that once again. But if that's always going to be substantial, how will we ever have a government that functions? But the problem is, this government has gotten so far out of control by infringing upon the civilians and the businesses and everybody else that at what point does the government become a tyrannical enterprise, a criminal enterprise, if you will, that is the very basis of why we had the American Revolution? One can question, are we back to where we were when the American Revolution began?